Hey, Austin, now you can get up to 10 LG Stylo 2 smartphones for your whole family on Sprint. You just have to activate 2 or more smartphones on any plan, and if you choose the Unlimited Freedom plan from Sprint, you can enjoy it on your new LG Stylo 2. Don't miss this and other great offers at the Sprint Says Thanks event this Saturday, October 22nd. Visit a Sprint store, sprint.com, or call 1-800-SPRINT1 today. Coverage and offer not available everywhere. Subject to credit and $30 activation fee. Excludes taxes, surcharges, roaming, and premium content. $0 per month after $10 monthly services applied within 2 invoices. Requires 24-month installment billing agreements for well-qualified customer purchasing at least 2 devices with at least 1 new line activation. Tax due at sale. Early termination results in remaining balance at full price due.
We are living in a computer-programmed reality, and the only clue we have to it is when some variable is changed and some alteration in our reality occurs. We would have the overwhelming impression that we were reliving the present, déjà vu, perhaps in precisely the same way, hearing the same words, saying the same words. I submit that these impressions are valid and significant, and I will even say this: such an impression is a clue that at some past time point a variable was changed, reprogrammed as it were, and that because of this an alternative world branched off.
Good afternoon and welcome to another edition of the Robert Phoenix Show. Today, this is where we go deep, wide, and far. This is the Friday FARcast. And normally I'm solo. I'm the Lone Ranger out here on many Fridays. And occasionally I have guests. And when I do, they're somebody I feel pretty strongly about and are interested in what they're doing and what they add to our collective experience. And today's guest is right in that center of the universe. She's an author. She's been with me before. Her name is June Obrien. She's got a new book. We're going to talk about her new book and the Blue Child series, which is what she has become known for. But June is a woman of many dimensions and many layers. And the first half hour, we'll talk about her literary work. And in the second half hour of the show, we're going to get into June's dream work, her dream life, her relationship to ancestral spirits. And you're going to want to hold on and listen to the entire hour because it's not often we get to connect in with one of the wise sages of our culture, and June is certainly one of them. Before we bring her on, I just want to tell you that today is a 2-hour show, and in the second hour, I'm going to talk about what happened last night at the Alfred E. Smith dinner in New York City, where the guests of honor were Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton. And what I saw last night blew my mind on so many levels. So we're going to talk about that in the second hour. But right now, what we're going to do is we're going to tap into the analog world. The analog world, the organic relationship with spirit and plants and animals. In the way of magic, which many of us have lost touch with. But our guest, June Obrien, is able to translate her inner life into a series of books that enable us to stay in touch with that magic. And it doesn't matter how old you are. It's always there and available for us to tap into. Hi, June. Welcome to the show.
Good morning, Robert.
So how is it up there in the lovely and magical Pacific Northwest?
Magical as always. I've fed the deer. The crows seem to be content. The fog is moving in, so it's just like I like it.
Beautiful.
I love the Northwest. I love the easy access to the mystical. When I go up into the mountains on the Olympic Peninsula, it's there waiting.
So June, I'm just before we go into this deeper, I'm just going to need to have you speak up a little bit louder because we're having a bit of a audio sort of waffle. You're just a little too low on the volume side.
Can you hear me better now, Robert?
Yeah. Let's roll with that. Yeah.
Yes.
Well,
All right.
Congratulations on the new book that just came out. Your other books have met with critical acclaim. You're an award winner, and the reviews, whether it's on Amazon or whether it's just from people in general, are outstanding in terms of the Blue Child series. Why don't, for people that aren't familiar with the Blue Child series, why don't you go ahead and sort of give them a brief overview about, what they comprise in this trilogy, and then we can begin to get into your new book. How's that sound?
That's good, Robert. The Blue Child series begins on the Olympic Peninsula, and there are 3 American Indian sisters who are called by spirit. But at the beginning, they don't know why they are called. Nevertheless, they respond and begin this spiritual journey to save an old medicine. And the books are written from an American Indian worldview, and the sisters are deeply embedded in their tradition. And so they approach this journey from that point of view.
Mm-hmm.
And in On the Mountain, the first book, we are with Ruby, who is an old woman, and she encounters what I call the old ones, and what are called the old ones by some of the local tribes, which are actually what some people call Sasquatch or Bigfoot. And they lead her to the discovery of the Blue Child, which is a spirit that is sent by, well, let's just say, a cosmic entity to help the people. And in the book, we meet the Lilin, who are the evil people who are all about power and any access to power that they can locate. And so they are in pursuit of this child and her medicine. Then in the second book, we are making the trip from the Southwest, where the sisters have arrived. And we're going from sanctuary to sanctuary. And there are 4 of them. And the 4th road is the road from sanctuary to sanctuary, leading back to the Northwest. And the sanctuaries are those places in which the earth and the sky, or I guess you could say the eternal, are still whole. and they're dangerous places, but they're also places of power in which extraordinary things can happen.
Mm-hmm.
They're portals.
Right.
And so in the second one, Pursued by the Little Lilin, the sisters and Blue make that return journey. And then in the third book, culmination of all of it. And
which is the new book, The Last Song, which is the third book in the trilogy. Yep.
That's right. That's right. And so what I've done in a lot of these books, or in these books, is pull together my understanding of how it works in kind of a big way, and how medicine works, and what I've learned about medicine over the decades. And there's things that aren't in Indian country supposed to be said directly. And so I refer to them in elliptical kind of ways. I refer to them indirectly so that people might be able to benefit, but without violating the way one is supposed to talk about these things.
Right. It's interesting. Let me just sort of jump in here with that piece. You're being culturally sensitive on one level, and at the same time, you're also participating in a tradition which is much more nuanced and evocative than what we're used to. So it's almost like you have to go through two levels of kind of filtering in your own way in order for whatever it is that you want to talk about to come through. And you're doing it in the kind of the language of fiction, which is even basically a third level. It's not like philosophy or, straight out wisdom teachings. So this is a very interesting and very distilled process that you're engaged in, and very different from how we consume information now, which is very, very explicit, very soundbitey, very kind of YouTube-ish, and almost to some degree based on the world and the universe that you're tapping into, even pornographic, just in terms of its explicit nature. I think it's a fascinating process. And my question to you around this is, how do you stay in touch with that? How do you kind of live with this sensitivity to the culture and to the material?
Well, to me, it's the only way to live in a satisfactory life. It's the only way to live in the depth that the human is capable of, and in the way that satisfies something of the spirit that is meant for humans. It's our proper food. It's our proper spiritual food. And if I get to feeling shallow or out of touch, excuse me, I'll ask for a dream, or I'll go into the deep mountains, or there's certain isolated places on the coast that I will go, and I pray. But my intention is to always be embedded there, not to go into it and come out of it, but to always keep my psyche open to the dream, or to the spirit talking, the dream in the daytime, the dream of the daytime, the part of the psyche that is always seeking that connection.
In your second book, the North Road, there's a migration to the Northwest. And for people who are familiar with the medicine wheel, the 4 points on the medicine wheel are fairly specific in terms of their symbolic meaning. Can you talk to people and give them some understanding for people who are not familiar with the medicine wheel and what that journey to the north is all about?
Well, the journey to the north is the journey into spirit, into deep spirit, and into wisdom, and into that elder place. You can look at, there are icons and pictures that teach about the dimensions and teach about this territory of the north. And one of the ones that I like best is the white bear is lying on the ice, and there is a woman standing there with your heart in her hand, and she has a staff that reaches from earth to the stars. And so you move into that territory of open portal so that it is possible for the spirit to communicate more directly. And it is a beautiful, beautiful, mystical place to be. And I think it's every human's home, every human's, right to be able to stand in that space. Do you understand what I mean by every human's right?
What happens as part of this process that dislodges us from that connection in that place? You've done a lot of work both internally and with your career as with a psychoanalytic background. To the best of your ability, where do we go? Where do we stray off the path here?
Well, social engineering, if we wanted to just use shorthand there, does not intend us to ever reach this destination, and it intends to edit out this kind of experience, to give it a label that keeps us from that territory. Because in that territory, you are in your own power and in your own authority. And so those opportunities that let us have our own experience, to not edit out our intuition and our feeling and what we actually see and what we actually feel. That's the territory where we want to be. And it's beyond psychology, and it's beyond the victim-perpetrator dynamic. It is territory in which something bigger happens. And I think people have these experiences all the time, but we get pulled out of them. They're not as difficult to access as we're told. It's just that we're taught to hit the delete button when they occur.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we move beyond, when I know that I am bigger than my own psychology, when I know that my real self is beyond my personal angst or my inadequacies or my fears, then something blooms. And I think it's just one step away. You know, it's not, we could call it a long journey and we could put it in those terms as I have in the books, but I really think it's just a side step close.
Mm-hmm.
It's called living in the medicine. You know, when, of course, you go to the store and you do the things that you do and you take care of business, but you're always keeping that taproot in the medicine of who you really are.
So this actually dovetails with your ability to stay in that place, to stay in the, the isolated beach, or to stay near a quiet grove of trees sort of blowing in the wind on the mountain, and to have that as a living, breathing analog for your daily life. This comes through in the books in a big way. I just thanks to you, gifted a young girl the series, and she's just completely blown away, and dialoguing back and forth with her mother, reading the books together, and really kind of opening up a deeper dialogue between the two of them, which is, I think, wonderful. And I think that your books have the potential to do that no matter what age the people are. This is eternal stuff. And I wanted to ask you about the transition from your second book to your latest book, and what that was like for you, because I know that it takes a very different kind of direction in terms of the series. The last song is pretty ominous in its own way. What was that like for you as an author? Because I know that when you get into material and all of a sudden it's taking on a life of its own, how much did you say to yourself, well, I'm not sure where this is going. This is a little darker than I thought it would be. I'm just going to let go and see where this takes me. What was that like for you?
Well, Robert, I wasn't sure that of a couple of things. I wasn't sure I could pull it off. And then I wasn't sure I was going to survive it. Because what I found is that I had to do something with evil. I had introduced evil in the other books, and that I had to actually address it and what I know about it and how it and its spiritual aspects, its spiritual dimension, and that I couldn't just, do something heroic like kill the evil people. And I wasn't sure what I had churned up in the silt at the bottom of the pool. And I had to have, a couple of times, I had to have spiritual people come in and work with me even, because I'm still not sure because of why. But there was a point that it was very, very difficult. And in this third book, it's actually a ceremony that occurs, timelines and in different dimensions. And the idea of the last song is, if the right things don't happen, those entities that have the power to do it will sing the world down. And so I wasn't sure what all I was caught up in the writing of the third book. And then, oddly enough, beautifully enough, as I was finishing it, I began to hear a different song, literally, and was able to pull myself through it with a little help from my friends and finish the book. But it did not go where I intended. The first two books are, I think, beautiful and lyrical, and somewhat is, but we spend a lot of time in the world that I know something about, but I don't often talk about.
Yeah. I know you're a big dreamer, and dreams play a huge and powerful role in your life and your work. What were your dreams like during the creation of the last song?
Oh, my. I am a big dreamer, and the whole series started with a dream. But there are dreams that I call downloads, in which the dream maker, the person who feeds the material into the human world, seem to struggle for language and image to communicate. And then finally we kind of got that right so that I could begin to understand. And she began to talk to me about how some of these multidimensional worlds work. Mm-hmm. And out of that, I have a lot of faith. I have a lot of faith in where this is going. I have a lot of faith in the big story that is going on. And so I felt like I had a lot of help. It was very, very difficult, but I had lots of help. And I had lots of help from the big guys, as well as my friends.
Mm-hmm. I've often made an analogy between the life of the artist and the life of the mystic, and the two share one thing in common, and that's faith. Faith in that the mystic has a faith in something greater than its own ability or the being's own ability to accomplish something, no matter what. And it's tested along the way, obviously. And the artist has a similar faith in that once it begins to execute on a creation, that it will address itself, it will appear, it will manifest, and the process will complete itself, and even the process afterwards, and that it will bring whatever it needs to bring into that individual's life. That requires faith as well. How much was your faith tested during both your spiritual and your creative faith tested in the last song?
Well, the creative faith was profound. And early on, I took part of my writing to someone who really knows my voice as a writer and who I really trust. And I said, am I pulling this off? And she's Linda Strager, an amazing writer. And she said, yes, you are. You are doing it. Keep doing it. Go there. And so with her support, I did. The spiritual experience, as I said, was difficult. There are times when, I'm sure we all have them, those times when, what I call being on the floor, when something takes you to the floor. And from there, I am beyond what I know to do and how I know to help myself. Mm-hmm. And then when you are there, spiritually, something will come and pick you up. And that's what happened to me. And then I began to resurrect myself, so to speak, and went to the mountains again. And it's then when a new song, I could hear that. I could hear it. I could hear a new voice. And then I could pull through the knothole, mm-hmm. the content through the knothole. And
it's
so
an evocative image of the knothole. I like that.
Yes. And what I think happens with some material, when you pull something from the other dimension, I think it's a bit like that. Yeah. Then how do I pull this into the human world? How do I do that? And my teacher, I had a teacher from one of the tribes up north, worked with me for decades. And one of the things she also said is you have to remind Spirit every once in a while that you're in a human container. And that you need a little bit of help on that level as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, you and I had discussed that you would grab a couple of excerpts from the book and grace us with a reading or two. Do you have a few that you have lined up?
I do.
Okay. Well, why don't you set the stage for one, and then go ahead and give us a taste of your magic here, June.
Well, this is from the last song, Robert, and we are first of all I'm going to read these little bits I put at the beginning of each of the books and at the beginning of each of the chapters that sort of speaks to how I think it works. And so at the beginning of the last song, this is what I say. The story is still alive, the song singing. Don't be tricked or discouraged by lies that say this isn't so. Watch for the blue light, the flash at the corner of your eyes. The cobalt woman is near. She will not leave her children bereft, nor leave the story unfinished. And that's what I believe is true. That's what I believe is operating in the upper dimensions, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
And then at the beginning of the last song, we are speaking a little bit about the last song itself, which has potential to sing the world down, to remake it. And remembering that the blue lady or the cobalt woman is this cosmic creature. So this is how the book begins. On the Olympic Peninsula, the old one, creatures some call Sasquatch or Bigfoot gather in a mist-filled valley. If these ancient people sing the right song, the waters of the sea will vibrate, send resonant waves into the deep trenches, wake the creatures who live there from one age to another. The thin areas of the earth, the junctures of continents, and the majestic volcanoes will begin to move. The old ones are waiting for a sign from the heavens. If the ceremony afoot fails, if the children cannot be saved, they will take down their nests from the trees, pull the long houses back into mind. Their rumbling voices will rise to bring down the world. Their relatives will sing with them, those in the Cascade Mountains, in the Sierra Madres of Mexico, in the mysterious Andes that rim the Pacific coast. In preparation, the glittering spirits of the first sanctuary, those who guard its cliffs and the one door, dance. In the cave of songs, Esther, the sanctuary's keeper, sits on a stone bench. At the back of the cave, candles are lit before the carving of the blue lady. The sandy floor of the cave vibrates, but has not yet settled into song. At the second sanctuary, the waiting mother runs her fingers over the paintings of the walls, touches the images of the stolen children whose story is not finished, murmuring she is waiting for the star child, for the powerful gift she brings. At the third sanctuary, the young keeper at Mount Shasta is far beneath the mountain, in a cavern under all the others, before an altar of crumbling skulls. She is in deep meditation with the cave, with the core of the earth. On the walls behind her are stick figures of dark children in a meadow. Maybe they are human, maybe not. They could be the children of all the worlds that have been and are not. At the fourth sanctuary, Clara has gathered her children, her nephews and nieces, her grandchildren. If the old ones begin the song of unmaking, they will need her family's help to hold the fourth sanctuary in place. The cataclysm will rack the continents and rearrange the seas. The sanctuaries of the North Road must endure. So that's how the book begins, idea of the song that is waiting to see what happens in this complex ceremony.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that I believe is that as ordinary as our lives seem to us sometimes, there are things that we do and roles that we have that reach beyond what we imagine in importance. So shall I read another one, Robert?
Please.
Okay. So we are on the peninsula, on the Olympic Mountains again, and we are with Ruby's mother. And this again speaks to this idea of the last song. From the trees high on the mountain's shoulder, Ruby's mother watches her daughter leave. The final stages of the story, the ceremony of the snake for which the blue child was sent, have begun. Ruby's mother looks toward the sky above the mountain. She is listening for the cobalt woman. The old ones never forget their purpose, the axis they hold open, the road between sky and earth. If these creatures did not do their work, the earth would die. This would cause the sun to grieve and distress the constellations. It is impossible to guess the far-reaching result if the old ones failed, if they forgot who they serve. Ruby's mother is remembering a different song than the one she and the old ones sang to help Agnes and Blue. It is not yet known if this song will be necessary. But if the ceremony fails, Ruby's mother and the other old ones will sing it, even though it grieves the sun, even though it will make the galaxy weep. The music of this song is the groan of ice breaking, of rushing water, the bell-like voice of winter birds. The mountain listens to the humming of Ruby's mother. It has been a long time, even as measured by stone, since this song was sung. Upon hearing it, the mountain adds her voice. The glacier wakes to the voice rising from the mountain's roof. Wind blowing over wires or between stones, like starlight on snow. Beneath the sea, fault lines quiver. The grandfather of the Cascade Range rumbles. His children further south join him. In the Aleutian Islands, a volcano shakes. The old one, Ruby's mother, stops, lest her voice too soon rearrange the world. If a catastrophe like this becomes necessary, the Blue Lady will send a final message. If the call comes, the old ones and other creatures, those hidden in swamps and deep valleys, forests, the clefts between mountains, these will sing this beloved blue planet into its ending, into a new beginning.
I just get chills. Listening to that. That's poetry. It's poetry, and the thing that really strikes me with that is that this is a work that you can read on a page, but this is oral tradition stuff. This is a book that is meant. All these books, you can read them on your own, but you can also, share them and read them. Especially if you have children. Again, my girlfriend is reading the books to her daughter, and it's evocative and wonderful and slows time down. Thank you for that. That was beautiful. And one of the things that I was sort of, ruminating on while I was listening to the language is this relationship with the so-called inanimate universe, right? Or the world around us that has become, in a lot of ways, boiled down into concrete and plastic and pragmatism. And your world is anything but that. It is a living, breathing, animate universe filled with spirits. And my question to you around this is that there seems to be kind of two sort of fronts against keeping this universe and this magic alive. And one happens to be sort of quote-unquote reality, and even now virtual reality, and this kind of synthetic and artificial intelligence, which seems to be impeding upon the natural world. And the other, which I was thinking about while you're reading, was there's this kind of pedagogical intelligence that's really related to like Christianity. And anything that does not sit or rest within the framework and the pages of the Bible is considered evil or pagan. And so there are these two kind of prevailing forces, and they're both fairly dominant. And it seems to be that they're the sort of the I wouldn't call them the gatekeepers, but they're the noise, they're the interference, they're the impedance that keeps us from connecting to this magical, profound, natural world that has an immense amount of power and an immense amount of intelligence for us. What are your thoughts around that in this kind of war of the imagination, which is really what I would call it?
Oh, well put. I think, as I said earlier, it's intentional, and it's intentional to pull us away from our humanity and our human potential for communication with spirit to the roots of our power and the roots of our authority as a human being. And so there are parts of the brain that are being entrained by, for ease of language, by social media, by television, by everything that we confront. And it is intended to fragment our psyche and pull it into a narrow dimension of operation and to actually fragment it so that we can't have these more complete experiences that feed us. And when we're fragmented and we're pulled into these narrow dimensions of our possibilities, we grow more and more hungry, starving, actually. And so nothing is enough. Nothing is enough. Mm-hmm. But in this other world, when you have this more fully human experience, then being fed is easy. Being fed is available. But it is intentional, as I said, being pulled into this. One of the things I wasn't sure, I'm still not totally sure whether to say this or not, but one of the things I hear people talk about is that Christianity, as run through some indigenous communities, might re-find itself there. I have known Christian churches in Indian country that haven't lost the connection. It's almost like Christianity becomes indigenized.
Mm-hmm.
If you'd follow me there.
Oh, absolutely.
So
I mean, you can see this in places like Brazil, where it's been syncretized into Umbanda or Candomblé, and
right.
has become kind of reintegrated into a larger pantheon of elemental forces.
That's right. And so I know Christian people who see spirits all the time and don't see any contradiction between this. They experience Christianity and they experience these spirits and they see things before they happen and they, et cetera, et cetera. And so they haven't stopped, the people who in these places haven't stopped being indigenous. And they're the people, I've heard people say kind of half humorously, that Christianity needed to be scattered around the earth for it to remember itself. Just
interesting.
So that. Mm-hmm.
So what's the buzz been like with the new book? How are people receiving it? What kind of feedback are you getting?
Well, I had some trepidation about how people might come to it because it is so different. But it's actually selling pretty well, better than I anticipated. I thought people might be disappointed, but I think it's taking them a bit deeper. So it's selling pretty well, which is inspiring sales of the first two, or people who want to go back and start at the beginning.
Oh, that's interesting. I like that.
Isn't it? Yeah, I do too.
So if people wanted to purchase them, what's the best way of going about doing it? Should they go to Amazon? Should they go to you? Where should we direct them?
Amazon is actually the best to just go there and order copies. And, of course, you can get it in paper or digital.
Mm-hmm.
I always experience, I think books like this sometimes work better in paper. I don't know why, but I think they do.
Mm-hmm. I think they do too. You take your time. You know, there's an alchemical process that takes place when your fingers actually touch the paper. You know, there's a signal that gets sent to your brain.
Yes.
And your brain is linking up in a very different way. It's like there's like, okay, you know, this is an ancient act, the turning of the page. And digitally, we kind of lose touch with that.
And you can also, with the paper book, of course, flip. And I do have, there's one person in here who is a multiple personality. And there are places where people, if they're not acquainted with that world, they might want to flip back and reread something.
Right, which is essential. You and I talked briefly last time about, widening the scope of your readership. And one of the things that we sort of touched on is getting your books into the public school system. So and I know that there are people that listen to this show that are school teachers. So I just want to advocate, if you're a school teacher, to have a look at June's books. Get into them, maybe buy one, see if it works for you. And if it does, then, these are wonderful books. And, these trilogies and the adventure series are so popular now with children that it would be, a wonderful piece for not just one book, for an entire series to be worked on by a class. I remember when I was growing up, it was the Madeline Engel books, that we were kind of initiated into in the multiple versions, and then the Earthsea trilogy with Ursula Le Guin. And so it's not just, having a one-off experience. You actually can grow and evolve and get deeper understanding with the three books. So I just want to put that out to the school teachers out there. June, what I want to do now is I want to play a piece of music, and then when we come back, I want to spend the remaining amount of time that we have together to touch on some of the topics that you and I were speaking about privately about a week ago, which I think are also related to what we've been talking about with your books. And I think they're very powerful and important pieces. So let me play a little bit of music here. This is, I think, appropriate. This is from my dearly departed friend, Jorge Reyes, who I always felt was in touch with the spirit world. And as we approach Dia de los Muertos, brings up memories of being in Mexico City and walking through graveyards with him. So the name of the song is called El Sendero, which is the path. Here's Jorge Reyes. We'll be back in 3 minutes and 44 seconds with June O'Brien and going deeper with her on today's Friday FARcast. As the primordial and ancient sounds of Jorge Reyes drift into infinity We're back here with our guest, June Obrien, and she is the author of the Blue Child series, and she's also a teacher and a facilitator. And one of the reasons, or one of the pieces that sparked our reconnection here, this is the second time she's been on the show, was not just the fact that she has a new book that we wanted to talk about and bring to your attention, but also some of the subject matter that we touched on while we were talking together. And basically what happened was we were talking about the land of this country, and we were talking about the first people, the indigenous people that were here, and then the migration of the Northern Europeans, and of course the subsequent tragedy in many ways that occurred after this migration, and to a large extent even the karmic pattern that still exists as a result of that. And June told me that she is engaged in a work with another woman, and it's a psychological, spiritual work that is pretty profound and far-reaching, and gets into this whole notion of generational and even migrational grief. So I'm just setting the stage here because I want to hand this over to June so that she can contextualize this and flesh out what I'm talking about and what she's been able to tap into here as it relates to our place, this land, and what's happened subsequently. June, are you there? Can you hear me?
Yes, I am here, Robert.
Okay. So I just wanted to, yeah.
So I should say first that for many, many years, for decades, I worked with American Indian clients who experienced trauma. And I designed material for the treatment of trauma and did workshops and presented at conference and that sort of thing about historic trauma in Indian country. And doing that kind of work is very, very intense. And the historic trauma in Indian country relates back to the whole boarding school history when the children were stolen in the hundreds of thousands from their Indian families. And we meet some of these children, in fact, in the last song. But this was the nature of my work, this addressing historic trauma in Indian country. And the ones of us who did this work would talk amongst ourselves sometimes, saying this must be true of this same kind of generational trauma must also occur amongst those people who came to this country. Because how could it be otherwise? They lost land. Many of them lost their names at Ellis Island. They lost place and tradition, ancestors. They lost so much, community. And so they came here with this trauma, their own generational trauma, and they brought that here to this land. But the first time we talked about this in Indian country, not cross-culturally so much, but Linda Streeter, my amazing friend, who is an amazing artist, when I went to listen to her read her book about the immigration of her Norwegian grandmother in her book called Against My Dreams, it was the first time I had heard this immigrant trauma addressed. And it was also certainly the first time I was moved by an immigrant story. And so she and I began to talk about this. And we developed a presentation that we call Origins, because we wanted to create a space in which we could hold both our stories and both our histories and both our origins, because here we are in America and we have historic trauma in the indigenous community that results from colonization. But the immigrants also have their own trauma, unresolved. And what we know about unresolved trauma is that it depletes the spirit somewhat. And it makes one long for something unnameable and something bigger than just the individual human. And so she and I also talk about the role of the storyteller, of that person that has to go and collect the stories and do the work, and in a way do the work for the generations. Because the way I see this kind of work is that when I do my work in this territory, I'm not only doing my work, and I'm not only doing it for my grandchildren, but as I do it, I move outside of ordinary time and space, and I relieve the burden of my own ancestors in the long narrative of our history. You know, you could say I lighten the burden of my grandmother. And so she and I have done this training, or this presentation, not training, it's a presentation that we do here and there. And we have done it for multicultural counseling classes, in particular at St. Martin's University, to help those would-be therapists who want to work across culture readdress their own history and their own ancestors.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is to me, when you broach this, absolutely fascinating topic, and you know the tumbler started to click in my mind. And even now, as you're talking, I'm looking back at my own family history. As far as I know, on my maternal side, you know, my great grandfather, you know, goes all the way back to Gothenburg and comes to Long Island in the 1600s. One of the things that spurs him to come here is the death of his wife. Wow. And so, you know, and I'm sure that these kinds of, you know, that he was not alone, that these triggers would then, you know, kind of activate this need or want to go to a new place and create a new life with new people. And that's exactly what he did. He married somebody younger and had children in Long Island. And then from my father's side, you know, from what I know about his father and his father's father, not much more before that, was that they were kind of, you know, itinerant wanderers and, you know, not feeling very grounded or very rooted. And, you know, I'm just now putting this connection together about this displacement and the potential for generational trauma, because when you and I were talking, you were saying, you know, the same plants and the same foods and the same customs and the same sky and the same water is just not there.
That's right.
And it creates a completely different experience, and in many ways a gulf and a void. And clearly at a survival level at that point, unexamined. This is powerful stuff. Very, very powerful. I'm sure you've got some other kind of cultural markers that you've uncovered through your work with this.
I think it's important to realize that it is a profound grief to leave one's soil, to leave the air that you breathe, the scent of the trees, the earth, the community that your people knew for generations, and then move into a territory that is simply alien. And that moving into this new territory, the issues are survival. You don't have time, really, to grieve what needs to be grieved or even recognize what's gone, what's missing.
Mm-hmm.
But I think here we all are. We're here. And some of the markers, you can see this in some of the old traditions, is to call one's relatives in and to remember them and to listen if you don't have the actual stories, to listen in your imagination, to light candles for them, and to recognize the difficulty. What I say when I'm talking to indigenous people about these issues is I say, the generations before you were busy surviving, and they did their work because here you are. But you might be the first generation that can afford to heal, that has the luxury of healing and of doing the work for everybody. And so there is this way of also calling your ancestors from their places across the generations and across the decades and across even the hundreds of years, and saying, this is where we are, this is where I am, dear ones, my ancestors, this is where I am, in this land and in this place. And it sounds like a simple thing, but what often happens is your dreams will change, and you begin to have some of that greater depth in the dimensions across time.
So,
but it's also
I'm sorry, June, go ahead.
I also think it's what makes many Americans feel scattered and gives many Americans such a Eurocentric, a Europe-focused attention. They know that something didn't quite make the trip with them, something that they need here in this new land. And the indigenous people, when we talk about it, we talk about we need non-Indians to do that work. We need them to do that work so that there is an opportunity for new stories to arise, because here we all are together. The tribes are still here. The urban Indian communities are still here. And you are here. This is who we are now. And there's got to be a place for all of us.
Amen to that. If that's a message, if there's a message for our time, I think that's probably right up there, top three talking point for our time. I'm curious, because you're so close to the Native community, maybe you can give the rest of us some insight into how Northern European culture, the Northern European people, are now perceived by the native people, the first people of this country, this land. What's the general perception? Is there anger? Is there forgiveness? Is there acceptance? Where are we in that in that continuum, as far as you can tell?
Well, all of the above. You know, in working with indigenous people around these issues, what you first meet is a deep visceral rage. And then under that is profound grief. And then when you work through that, new possibilities become present, new ways of thinking.
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the things that many indigenous people would like to see is not an easy translation of indigenous concepts into Northern European concepts. You know, it's kind of like, oh, it's all one God kind of thing. Yes and no. There is a creator being, but there are nuances that are different that I think inform the spirit. And so those Northern European people that encounter indigenous territory, it would be wonderful if they could let the unknown work on them a little bit and not quickly nail it down into the known.
Mm-hmm.
But to let that mystery, let the difference, let that mystery work on them a little bit. Not in order to make them indigenous here, but in order to let their own ancestors speak through that territory of the unknown into the mystery.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is why some people are attracted to Indian country. It's not because they want to become Indians, but it's because they want to remember their own bloodline, their
mm-hmm.
own DNA, what's in their bones. And it is in that little bit of the unknown. Let that be a little bit of the unknown. Let that dance there at the edge of things, and something will come through. But because we're so used to wanting to nail things down, to understand them, you know, to define it and move on, there's this little bit too quickness to say, oh, that means this. So
yeah.
I think,
go ahead.
And to let the environment speak, to live on this American land with your powerful Northern European blood. You know, one of the things I've learned from my friend Linda Strieber is about Norwegian mythology, the gods, the stories. My good gracious, powerful, and it's beautiful. But also to stand here on this land and let that cedar tree talk to you. Let that water talk to you. What was it Joseph Campbell said? If all the stories disappeared and all the songs, the stones would teach us again. The waters would tell us what the songs were.
You know, we're living in a time where this whole notion of land and identity and grievances, it's all coming up. And astrologically, we're going to be moving into Uranus and Aries in so it'll be in 2018. Uranus moves into Aries for 7 years, and Taurus. And in Taurus, it's about a new relationship, a radical relationship with the land and resources. This is going to be a very interesting time in terms of who owns what and has what, and what we use to acquire those things. And I think we have a limited amount of time, to be honest with you, in order to address these collective grievances, which is, again, going into astrology, Uranus and Aries, which is the radicalization of the self. And we're seeing this across the board, with a number of different groups and people. You have the alt-right, you have Black Lives Matter, you have the feminists, you have the progressives. Everybody is really standing on a soapbox with a megaphone trying to get their voice heard. And it's getting to a point where those voices, all of which, by the way, have been suppressed to some degree or another, are really shouting out to be heard. And I think we've got a limited amount of time to figure this thing out, because once the energy shift, the planetary energy shift, then our relationship with our place will become very different. Now, it could also be good. I'm not saying it's all going to be bad, but it'll be more chaotic, potentially more creative. And so I guess where all this is taking me, and this is what I'm just speculating as you and I are talking, that if there is a cultural and spiritual role that the indigenous or the native culture could play in a big way right now, is to step forward and basically say, hey, we have gone through X, Y, and Z, and we're at a point now where we're seeing all this deep division and cultural divide, and we just want to put our voice into ending that or addressing that so that we can move on, so we can have a relationship with the Northern European culture and everybody that came after that. I mean, I think it could be, and I'm not saying they have to, I'm saying it could be a very powerful role to play, because this is, in some ways, the culture that might have sort of, everybody's got their own version of grievance, which is based on grief. But this is one culture that we traditionally look at as being kind of this first transgression, or the original sin, if you will, of this land and place. And if it could happen, I think it could have a profound effect on everybody else. And I don't know if you've ever explored this notion in your work. If I'm bringing up something you guys have discussed, about you and Linda have discussed, but I just wanted to put that out there to you and wanted to see what your thoughts are with this.
Well, let me go back for a sec. I've talked about historic trauma, but it's not as if all of the attacks have gone away. They are current in Indian country. Let me just mention this part. Reservations were put largely in territory that the government never imagined themselves wanting. But it so happens that they are often on land where there is uranium now, coal, and now water.
Mm-hmm.
And so tribes have been under attack for these and other reasons. And that's why you see this big movement in North Dakota to protect the water. And protecting the water is literally protecting the land and the survival of all of us. So that is there, active, out there.
Ongoing.
But I think that this victim-perpetrator binary, this dynamic, is one of the ways our psyche is being deliberately fragmented. And it is not that there aren't grievances and not that we don't have issues, all of us, to address. But if I cannot move past my own victimization into a bigger territory, not without denying what is, but into a bigger territory, it prevents me from the experience of power. To the extent that I have an enemy who is, quote unquote, to blame for everything, I have given away my power.
Mm-hmm.
And so if we as individual human beings want the experience of our own authority and our own power, we have to step out of that binary. We have to step into something that is bigger than that.
Mm-hmm.
I think that one of the things that a lot of Northern Europeans want is Indian ceremony. But I'm not that sure that that's where the attention should be on what is going on in Indian country. It might be more helpful just to look at this issue of origins and this issue of who am I, where do I come from,
Mm-hmm.
What is my ancient self, and to look at some of these issues that are going on under the surface, literally and figuratively, in Indian country, like the water. Who else is gathering around the water? But what you have up there in North Dakota is over 500 tribes who have gathered there, who are saying, we're here to protect the water. We're here to protect the protectors of the water.
Mm-hmm.
When we look at a lot of the environmental movement right now, it's all gotten channeled into one aspect. But we are no longer looking at, and it has taken our attention from looking at the water and the earth.
Mm-hmm.
We used to look at issues of pollution. We used to look at those kinds of questions, but we're being diverted away from that.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
Our underground reservoirs are being polluted, and we are told that water, we do not have the right as human beings to water.
Mm-hmm. That's correct. Yep. Yeah. I mean, the whole notion of the quote-unquote environmental movement was really broad, very comprehensive, and included things like pollution, radiation, the water, asbestos, chemicals, toxicity in the soil and food. And now it's been reduced to basically two very cheap and exploitative words, which are called climate change.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And all of our energy is being taken away from what is going on in our local areas and what is going on around us. Mm-hmm. And it's been channeled into this narrow territory as another means of controlling us as humans and
mm-hmm.
narrowing our focus.
Absolutely. And what are they doing? They're preying upon trauma.
Yes. They're preying upon trauma at the same time that they are creating a new layer of trauma, new layers of trauma.
Yeah.
Because as long as we can be held in our trauma, we are diminished. We are made small.
Mm-hmm.
But when we can move outside that programming, that deliberate programming, then we can begin to hear the big story, the big song, and we can find other people who can hear that and connect and remind each other that we are human beings, that we are powerful spirits, and that we are here for a reason.
Wow. I agree wholeheartedly. And the essence and the seeds and the shoots of what you're saying are in your books. It's all in there, and it's in there in a way that people can listen and hear in a deeper kind of way, you know, in a more metaphoric, allegoric, symbolic fashion. And when we get into that language, the ability to experience that material goes much deeper. It's not a sound bite. It's not a meme. And this is the meat on the bones. And I just want to thank you for all the work that you're doing, and the commitment and the sacrifice. Because it sounds like this last book, there was a great deal of sacrifice involved for you on a psychic and an emotional level. So I just want to thank you for that, and thank you for, you know, being a human on this planet at this time, and thank you for being on the show. It's always wonderful to have you on here, Joan.
Oh, thank you, Robert, so much.
You're welcome.
I count on your work as well. I listen to you. I go to you. I go, oh, and with these new shows you're doing, I love those, Robert. I love to anchor in with you.
Well, thank you. You know, 15 minutes is manageable, and some days I want to talk more, but I've got that clock. It's ticking. So it's a good exercise to try to get it all out in a relatively brief period of time. And I have another half hour, so I get to unwind a little bit and talk about this event last night. Did you see that, by the way? The dinner?
No, I didn't. No,
oh my God.
I didn't.
It's on YouTube, and I'm going to be talking about that. And if you haven't seen the video of Trump and Hillary at the Alfred E. Smith dinner, this is a dinner that takes place every year, and Alfred E. Smith, I believe his father ran for president at one point in time, Al Smith.
Oh, yeah.
And so this is a benefit dinner. It's significant. It's the 1,000 movers and shakers in New York. And they come every year, and they spend a lot of money to get in, have the food, and 2 people are part of the roast that goes on. And last night it was Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton. And it was kind of mind-blowing, to be honest with you. I'll talk more about what I saw. And if you haven't, it's on YouTube. And it's about a half an hour. You can watch Trump's 15 minutes, Hillary's 21 minutes, and they're very telling, both of them. And I'll just leave it at that.
Okay.
Thank you,
Robert.
You're welcome. And if you want to find June's books, go to Amazon.com, the Blue Child series, June O'Brien. Let's get the magic out there. We need a little more magic in our world. June, you take good care, and I'll see you out there in the virtual realm, okay?
All right, Robert. Thanks.
That is June O'Brien. Isn't she wonderful? I just love having her on. I remember the last time I had her on, it was like, first of all, you know, I had no idea. I met June as a client, and through the work, I realized that she was a writer. I looked at her chart, Gemini writer, and I saw it. And it's like, bang, she was. And then she, unfolds these books. And I'm like, wow. And then I had her on the show, and she blew my mind the last time. And it was kind of like having a really good meal and wanting to have that meal again at that same place that you had it. And it's been, I think, almost 2 years since June's been on the show. And so we just had that good meal again. And like I said, if you're a teacher and you want her to connect with her material, check it out. This is the kind of stuff our kids, could really benefit from reading. And I'll leave it at that. So I wanted to talk about this piece last night, the Alfred E. Smith dinner. I don't want to play Trump's part. It's 15 minutes. If I play the whole thing, we'll be almost out of time. But it was mind-blowing. Let me just set the stage for you. What you see at this dinner is a full-on wide-angle, but every now and then a close-up of the speaker on the dais. But it's a fairly wide angle, and it's tiered. People sitting at tables that are tiered, like stadium seating. And there's the dais. The closest to the dais is Hillary Clinton. Okay, this is significant, that she's the one closest to the microphone. Then there's Trump. Oh, I'm sorry. Then there's a cardinal. One of these creepy-looking cardinals. I mean, just the get-up from, 5 centuries ago. And garish. And, the red cap and the cross. I mean, it almost looked like it was like a Halloween costume. And there's the cardinal there. And then there's Trump on the other side of the cardinal. And then there's Melania. By the way, no Bill Clinton. Not there. 3 flights up, or 3 rows up, Henry Kissinger. 1 row down from Henry Kissinger, Gayle King. There's Bill de Blasio. There's Bloomberg. There's Cuomo. They're all in attendance. Giuliani up in the far right wing, everybody who's anybody is there. And then there's the other people who you don't see. And they're kind of, back behind the cameras. But they're there, and they're eating, and they're big money. They're just not as big money as the people on the stage. And Trump went up there, and they both had material written for them. It's obvious. Trump went up there, and he read his material. He looked tired. He looked, I wouldn't say resigned, but he had the look of a man who is woken up. And he's woken up into a nightmare. And I was talking with Randy Moggins this morning. Of course, a lot of you know Randy from Off Planet Radio and some of the great work that he's done. And Randy and I were talking about, Randy has been typically anti-political, anti-election, and he and I both came to the same agreement, Trump. That this is a guy that's done a pivot. He has done a pivot. He has put himself into this thing. And he has risked a great deal. I don't care what you think about his language, what he said 12 years ago. I want you, just for a moment, let's take away the fact that he has millions and millions and millions of dollars. Nobody really knows how much he has. But his wealth isolates him and insulates him in a way that it does not for you and I. Take that out of the equation, because at some point you kind of get used to it. The things you can buy and the things you can do, they just become ordinary. And it's like a fish that's living in water. It doesn't really know that it's living in water until either the bowl is cracked, disturbed, or the fish is taken out of it. That would be similar to having some kind of an economic crisis in one's fortune. And all of a sudden the bowl gets a little tricky to navigate through. But let's take that aside, and let's say that you are running for this office, and this is a gauntlet. This is an office where the power brokers and the people who have held on to the power for centuries are not going to let it go. And they're going to do everything in their power in order for this person to experience as much pain, as much grief, as much suffering, so that psychically it is no longer bearable and they have to remove themselves. Think about what it would be like to live with that pressure 24/7. Do you think that Donald Trump is so cavalier and so nonchalant and so fuck you that none of this matters to him? That having to defend himself 24/7? Having children? And maybe he's got skeletons in his closet we don't know about. I've talked about them. They've been brought up. But I saw a guy last night that was human. I saw somebody who looked into the face of his opposition, who was booing him at that dinner. Booing him. Why would he subject himself to that? Why? Is he such a masochist that he's having to prostrate himself in front of the power elites of New York and the world to be humiliated? And not just New York and the world there in that room, but every single day. You know, my girlfriend took her daughter to, this is really interesting, took her daughter to a Clinton event yesterday in Arizona. And the daughter is really cool. She was interviewing people. I should play that one interview. Let me see if I can dial this up here. Hold on. I might be able to do this live. Hold on. Let's see if I can play this interview. Here we go. Let me see if I can just access this. This is a Clinton supporter from yesterday. Here we go.
Different subjects. So I was wondering what your standpoint is on immigration.
That's a good question. I think that people should be allowed into this country because that's the basis for this country, that everybody's welcome. My parents immigrated here. So did everybody's parents. I know. So, whoa. Sorry.
So you do not like Trump here? Not Trump.
Are you serious? I'm an intelligent woman. I do not like him. I don't even like to say his name.
Okay, I'm going to stop the interview right there. She said two things. She talked about the refugees and immigrants, and she's like, yeah, my parents are immigrants. Well, I'll tell you what, her parents were immigrants during a different time. It was a different time. And her parents assimilated. They assimilated. They learned the language very quickly so they could get up and running and they could start a business and start to make money. Now, if you come from another country, guess what? You get very low interest loans to start your own business and get up and running so you could have a hotel or a gas station or a 7-Eleven. This is how it works. And then guess what? You get to enclave. And you get to live amongst your group of people because that's where you're going to feel safe, secure, and be able to do business amongst one another. Yes, it happened that way a long time ago, but it didn't stay that way for very long. So this woman is completely off the mark. But then she talks about Trump. And she says, are you kidding? I'm an intelligent woman. I'm an intelligent woman. I won't even say his name. This is what Donald Trump has to live with every single day. Now, Hillary Clinton has to live with it every day too, but let's be clear about this. We're talking about two very different histories and people that have been engaged in very different walks of life. No matter what you think of Trump, what you think he might have done, Hillary Clinton has been involved in some form of genocide at some level, at some point in time throughout her political career. We can see going all the way back to the Branch Davidians, Waco. I've talked about this. What happened there under Hillary's and Janet Reno's watch, going all the way forward into Libya, in the destabilization and the murder of Muammar Gaddafi, who wanted to turn Libya and North Africa into a place that would be self-sufficient, self-sustaining, have its own currency, and the global elite and the bankers did not want to have that, no part of it. Bringing this back to Trump last night, bringing it back to Hillary, and what Randy and I were talking about, is that no matter what you think of Donald Trump, and I've said this again and again and again, and I'm on the record now, that we'll be on the record for the next 20 days, that he brings enough chaos. He brings enough chaos to the continuum that it buys us some time so that we can wake up. It buys us some time. Because I'll tell you right now, if Hillary gets elected, and what I saw last night was a being that was completely confident that that was going to take place. Now, I said a being. I didn't say a human or a person. I'm not convinced that the person or the thing that we are seeing right now is the same Hillary that we've seen in the run to the election or through the primaries, often looking gaunt, having coughing fits, going through her spasmodic herks and jerks. This is not the same entity. There's something going on with Hillary. I don't know if she is a new version of the clone. I don't know if she's a hybrid. But last night I watched her. She looks younger. She looks more vital than Trump at this point. She was reading her script with the timing of a comedian, a stand-up comic. Perfect timing. And Trump was having to push the lines to a room that was not welcoming what he had to say. You know, I think that what we're looking at is we're looking at kind of the first real incursion of AI with Hillary. That there's an AI interface going on with her right now. And I don't know if it's just straight AI. I don't know if it's, multi-dimensional or interdimensional possession. But I'm telling you, what I saw were two species last night. One was human and one wasn't. And the way that she emotes is it's digital. It's digital. It is not necessarily analog. But, and Randy pointed this out, which I thought was interesting, that this version of Hillary, even though she's digital, is more human in some ways than the other version or versions of Hillary that we've seen. More engaged. And then after the dinner was over, Hillary uttered her last line, and Alfred E. Smith brought the event to its end. Trump and Melania got up, walked out, and the camera stayed on Hillary working the room with all of these people that looked like they were extras, from Stanley Kubrick's Eyes Wide Shut. They were all probably going to some freaky mansion after the dinner. Huma Abedin was there. So was Dr. Frankenstein. He was there. I'm not sure why he's there. So if you have time, watch that video. It's kind of amazing. I'm not going to play it. You watch it on your own. I mean, I could play it, but you wouldn't get to see Trump. I'm telling you right now, it is not scripted. It is not scripted. This guy has done a pivot. And he's decided to take the dark world on. I'm telling you. And something dark may happen to him. I mean, he may be sacrificed. Randy was talking about how he was feeling that there was something fairly dark coming in the next week or so. And that might be the case. So I've taken a lot of heat on my flames. And the one thing because of my evolving stance towards Trump, and the one thing, again, I will say, and this comes from eyewitness account yesterday at the event my girlfriend and her daughter went to, and by the way, they could not get in. Couldn't get in. Could not walk through the doors. Hillary was there, Bernie was there, Michelle, Tim Kaine, Bernie, they were all there. They couldn't get in. And oh, by the way, once she signed up to be able to get in, she's been hit with 7 emails over the last 24 hours to donate. She didn't get 1 email from the Trump people to donate. And she got into that event. And so they walked across the street, and there was a woman who had a cafe, and she was handing out brownies. She was handing out brownies for people that are engaged in the capitalist system. And it was there while they were eating brownies that they had a conversation with 3 guys who were not Hillary supporters. And for all intents and purposes, these guys were clear, they were honest, they were open, they had their hearts connected. And this is really, in a lot of ways, the last stand of the middle class, of the working people, of people who are not going to regurgitate a talking point. They're not going to regurgitate some kind of idiom. These are people who have been part of a generation after generation after generation who've worked their ass off in this country. And they see what's happening, and they see what's taking place, and they see they're being displaced by, for all intents and purposes, agents of AI and people who will summarily dismiss other people because they're deplorable, because they have a desire and a right to speak up and speak out and speak against the tyranny of governance that proclaims it is of and by and for the people. The lie is being exposed. The information is circulating, and people are waking up. And the world is headed towards division, and there's no 2 ways about it. I once thought that we would all awaken together, every single one of us, and even people like Dick Cheney. I'm not sure that's the case anymore, as we're dividing along lines of bifurcation and consciousness. And one side believes it's more enlightened than the other. The other side has been always asked to self-examine, look at itself, put itself through the spiritual, the social, and the cultural ringer in order to come out on the other side and be more presentable, appropriate, and politically confirmed. Well, that process just isn't playing anymore, because most people have realized that the sacrifice of their heart, their ideals, and their tongue is not worth the gift of social and personal redemption as it is personified and granted by the other side. And it will never be enough. It will always be about being ground into dust until there's nothing left. Powder, ash, a quivering mass of what once was. And this is what's awakened in the American populace. It may not have awakened in the world, but here it has. And if there's anything that comes out of this, it's the fact that the people who have been doing the hard work, paying the taxes, paying their fair share, doing what was told of them, and now realizing that the people telling them what to do are the same people that want to completely sell them down the river with global trade deals and all the other things that go along with it, that they'll wake up and they'll get through their anger. And on the other side of that anger is grief. And everybody's got it. And they can get through their grief, the grief that they let so much of it go, the grief that they gave their power away to some institution and some ism, and the time that was lost, and the lives that were lost around it. This is a very powerful time, and we can take our power back. We can. But it takes courage, it takes nerve, and it takes a willingness to walk through the fire. And Trump may lose. What I saw last night, whatever that entity was, that entity was working the room like the outcome was already decided. And no matter what happens, it's going to be in the White House, and it's going to be determining not only the fate of this country, but the fate of the earth, and shortly. So be prepared for that. That may be the fire that we have to walk through. But if there's anything that we know about life, and anything we know about the universe, is that chaos does exist. It is a force. And when it's unleashed in a natural way, and not a pre-planned, preordained, and programmed way, it is a powerful agent that creates havoc and change. Ordo ab chao, but in an organic kind of way. Or we're coming into Scorpio now. We're 3 days away from the entrance of that sign into the zodiac, in the time of depth, the time of death. Scorpio is the sign of descent into the underworld, and to arise and awaken. In the next sign, Sagittarius, into greater consciousness and greater will. And with that, you know the drill. Use your head to discern what's real, your heart to stay open to what's possible. I want to thank June O'Brien once again for being on the show. Have a great weekend. This is Robert Phoenix. I'll see you on Monday. I'll see you on Sunday nights, 11th House Radio. Maybe we'll do the live stream and 11th House Radio simultaneously. Cross your fingers. I'm out of here.
We are living in a computer-programmed reality, and the only clue we have to it is when some variable is changed and some alteration in our reality occurs. We would have the overwhelming impression that we were reliving the present, déjà vu, perhaps in precisely the same way, hearing the same words, saying the same words. I submit that these impressions are valid and significant, and I will even say this: such an impression is a clue that at some past time point, a variable was changed, reprogrammed as it were, and that because of this, an alternative world branched off.
When you don't go to Geico.com, car insurance can seem intense. Like breakup R&B intense.
I thought you said you loved the sweater that I got you. If you didn't, you could have told me.
Geico makes it easy. Just go to Geico.com anytime to update or check your policy without all the extra drama.
I even had a gift receipt.
This is Survivor Ben. It's been 23 days in the wilderness. Food is now real hard to find.
Excuse me, I'm heading to the lake in my Tundra. If you see a Tacoma and a 4Runner, tell them I went this way.
Okay.
I'm starving. Gotta go grill some steaks. Enjoy your hike.
You gotta be kidding me.
Qualified buyers get 0% APR for 60 months plus $2,000 special edition cash and a dependable 2016 Tundra Crew Max Special Edition. Toyota, let's go places. Visit gstoffers.com for details. Offers available in select states and end 10/31/16.